Okay, welcome to Factory Talk, another episode here with my good friend Sean Holly today.
Factory Talk: Secrets of Effective Plant Leaders. Produced by
So, Sean, why don't you introduce yourself, a little bit of your background and what you do today?
Sounds good, Jamie. Great being able to spend a little bit of time with you today. And I'll go ahead and give everybody kind of the full introduction. So, ended up starting my career not in manufacturing. I ended up accepting a commission in the United States Navy where I did special operations and bomb disposal work for about 6 years. After coming back from Iraq, I was talking with my wife and was planning on doing a couple more tours of duty and was really enjoying the work. And she was really kind of done with me doing that type of work. And so we had one of those tough conversations. And so in the interest of staying married, I ended up getting out of the Navy. I got lucky. I got accepted to a great graduate program up at MIT, where we were able to get 2 degrees in 2 years, the Leaders for Global Operations program. Just an absolutely stunning education and a great way to kind of pivot into what I was starting to become passionate about, which was manufacturing and operations kind of as a whole. From there, I got recruited to go work at Dell Computers. Didn't go to Austin, ended up going to a new desktop facility that was started up in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Did operations and materials management there, ran a team of about 500 people on the shop floor. That was really my first civilian shop floor sort of leadership position, and had a really great time with that. Right at that time, the mortgage crisis started to kind of hit and the mortgage bubble burst. My wife's family happens to have a small manufacturing company. I married up. I highly recommend it to anybody who can possibly do it. Do it as often as you can. That's what I say. And my wife's grandfather started this company called S&S Cycle, and used to be Blue Island, Illinois, moved up to Viola, Wisconsin. It's currently in the little foothills of in Viola, Wisconsin. And you basically have a bunch of CNC machinists. You've got a bunch of designers that are designing parts, and it's a full design, build, fulfill, repair sort of a business. So if you're familiar with S&S Cycle, you're obviously a Harley nut and somebody that really loves performance. If you're not familiar with S&S Cycle, S&S is to Harley as Roush is to Ford. That's probably the easiest way to think about it. So speed parts for motorcycles, everything from and replacement parts for motorcycles, everything from replacement parts for your iron head or your knucklehead, all the way through to a pro stock engine that can take you drag racing from 0 to 300 miles an hour in less than 7 seconds. So joined them as the director of operations and helped guide that business through the Great Recession and the economic downturn that was there, and ended up preserving the jobs that were in Viola, Wisconsin, just a little town of 600 people. So from there, we ended up buying the assets of a company called Crane Cams. Ended up taking on another kind of restructuring role there down in Daytona Beach, Florida. So if you know about car parts, it's proof that money doesn't come with instructions, right? It's valve train and ignition components, founded in 1953 by a guy named Harvey Crane. And we ended up taking that company out of a bankruptcy, putting it back together, and then eventually selling it to a strategic buyer in 2014. From there, after transitioning the assets over, ended up taking a job at Bell Helicopter as the director of operations in the Drive System Center. The Drive System Center is where all the transmissions for most all of Bell's helicopters are made. So it's a gear shop. It's got heat treat and processing, just a huge, beautiful heat treat and processing facility. Does a lot of case machining and rotor components, an assembly, a test lab, and paint booth and all that sort of stuff in casting, in forging, in bar stock, out completely assembled prop rotor gearbox that goes on the wing of a V-22. 655,000 square feet, about 1,500 people, 800 people total. And it was really a step back into large scale manufacturing from some of the smaller stuff that I had been doing. It was just an absolutely phenomenal time. Did that for about a year. Got asked to run the site, did that for about a year, got asked to run all of manufacturing for Bell Helicopter internally. So that's the blade shop, all the blades that go onto either V-22s, H-1s, or the commercial helicopters that Dell sells, as well as the Advanced Composite Center, which does things like wing skins, thick composites, grips, yokes, other structural composite work. And that's about 1.5 million square feet and about 1,500 people total across 3 different plants in 2 different cities. So from there, I ended up taking the role that I'm in now, which is running a small aerospace manufacturing company called J&E Precision. We're located up here in Southampton, Massachusetts, and again, we're digging into making U.S. manufacturing competitive, and putting our hands on parts and making things better. Right. So it's just a lifelong passion of mine.
Yeah, that's quite the track record of just some core operations jobs of varying scale and scope, and definitely in your blood. Certainly the MIT LGO experience. I doubt you'll be the last graduate of that program we'll have on the Factory Talk series. But kind of makes a statement in just in going through that, and such great companies, right? Many of them very well known, and or at least well known in their segments for people that know them. So you've been in a bunch of different roles in those operations. You're in one now, and so the daily discipline of operations has its draw. How do you start? What's the most important thing for you as you start every day in these types of roles, or in the role you're in now?
Hey, that's a great question. I think for me, how I start my day kind of sets the tone for not just how I enter an organization. As you can tell from my introduction, I've had to enter a lot of different organizations over time, but also how I make sure that I understand the pulse of that organization as we continue to move. So typically the first thing that I'll do when I come in a day is I hit the floor. I hit the shop floor. I walk around. I go and touch and look and learn and see and observe when I'm first in a new company or in a new plant. That gives me an opportunity to just kind of see the plant come alive, because I typically will get there just before most everybody else is coming to work for that first shift. And so as I'm walking around, what it starts to do for me is it starts to give me an idea of what the normal operating conditions look like, and where abnormalities can potentially come up. So the second thing that I'll do is I'll go back to my desk, and then I'll look at the metrics from the previous day. And what I'm trying to do is develop some level of intuition from walking through the shop of what good looks like, and then compare it to what the scoreboard says, to see if I can connect the metrics to the actual physical presence that's out there on the shop floor. And so what that does for me, at least over time, is that it's really kind of given me the ability to not have to be so reliant on looking at a scoreboard all the time, to understand when things are out of place. It gives me a sense of what's normal, and then I start kind of this subconscious list of things that I think could potentially be opportunities. Then I just start squirreling some of that stuff away to prioritize and work on later.
That's really interesting, because it's as much as we try to develop predictive measures and things like that, typically it happens on the shop floor first, right? Yep. And then we see it on the scorecard. And so being able to get closer to the abnormal conditions in both space and time allows you to deal with them much more head on. So that's an interesting approach around, building that intuition, right? Your own, it's not artificial intelligence, right? It's just intelligence.
Well, it depends on who you talk to, Jamie. I mean, really.
That's fair. I won't comment on that, but it really is understanding cause and effect, right? It's yep. Understanding the system as a system, and even though it's mostly metal, somewhat of an organic system, because there's so many components.
That's exactly right. And I think the thing about it is that there is a lot of organic matter that goes on in that shop floor, right? It's not just a mechanical process. It's also a very social process. And so connecting that, developing the intuition, getting a feel for the environment, at least for me, has been a very critical portion of what's made me successful, I think.
That's great. So with beyond the morning walkthrough, you already talked about the people and of course the problems. What are your important touch points throughout the organization? How do you both message and drive and lead, as well as receive the information you need? How do you sort of assemble the right touch points for that?
So I think it's very organic, right? So at first, when I'm first coming into an organization or first getting to know a plant and getting to know the people, what I'm looking for when I'm walking around, again, there's the kind of notional observations of the landscape, if you will. How does the equipment look? Where's the inventory sit? How did things flow? Can you tell what's, just by walking by something, can you tell something that is a priority versus not a priority? You know, those sorts of things. And then as you're walking around and you're being observational about the landscape, the wildlife comes out and touches you, right? And so what typically happens is especially early on, you're gonna, the informal leaders that are on the shop floor, the knowledge keepers, the people that drive influence in a very subtle way, are the first people that typically are courageous enough to kind of reach out, look at you, and come over and touch you, ask you questions, inquire, and probe to see who this new leader is. And so part of what I do is I'm feeling for and being very sensitive about who those key folks are, and then I just talk to them, I quiz them, I try to learn about what they do and get a good sense just from that dialogue about all the dirty rags that happen to be in their bucket, right? So of all the other leaders that have come through, what's all the baggage? What, you know, because typically speaking, leaders turn through plants a lot faster than the folks of the process experts on the shop floor.
Right.
And if you listen closely enough to that activity, to those interactions, what you end up doing is you end up understanding how all the other leaders have done well, and where they've been challenged in terms of driving strategy at the shop floor level. Mm-hmm. And it could be that they were driving the right strategy, but the messaging was off. Could be the messaging was great, but the folks felt lied to because there was never any follow through. Could be that you're walking into an organization that has a great history of performance, and the last thing that they want to do is have another leader come in and just put their spin on it and actually upset the apple cart, right? So really getting a good understanding of kind of what the history is, where the train tracks have been laid, and who those key informal leaders are, who you can actually go back to and bounce ideas off of as you're starting to develop a hypothesis for how to drive performance in the organization you're joining, is probably the most subtle and critical thing that I do in those, especially in those first 3 or 4 months. Mm-hmm. And then from those interactions, you end up developing relationships, and from those relationships, you end up being able to have sources of shop floor feedback that are absolutely invaluable to course correct, whether that's the performance of a frontline leader, whether that's the performance of a manager, whether that's your performance and how you're communicating. Because after you've broken the ice a little bit and you've been able to hear somebody and make an adjustment and give them something that they've been looking for a long time, that's probably an easy thing to do. The next thing you know, the person starts to trust you. Mm-hmm. And as you begin to build that trust, your ability to be very effective on the shop floor grows exponentially. You know, one brief example I would give you, when I was first taking over the rotor center at Dell, I was doing this process of kind of walking around, and I wouldn't just do it in the morning. I would do it 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. Anytime that I felt like I had a lull in the meeting schedule, I would just get out of my office and go. And you would find me wandering the floor in odd places and talking to people. I walk by this guy, and he's got this blade set up on a Bridgeport, and he's machining out a weight pocket that's probably 2 inches long by ½ inch wide, and the tolerances on some of these parts are unbelievably insane. And the guy's dialing in this blade using indicators on the bed of the Bridgeport, which is what you do in 1955, before DROs are invented, right? And so I ended up going, stopping this gentleman and saying, why are you doing it this way? Help me understand. Well, this is the way it's always been done. And I said, why don't you have a DRO on that thing? it's definitely more accurate and easier to, you'll be faster, it's more accurate, and it's not expensive. He goes, well, because nobody's ever said that I could get one. Yeah. So I go, let me see what I can do about this. And within 2 weeks, out of a surplus warehouse that we had one sitting on the floor with a DRO attached in a warehouse. All somebody had to do was call maintenance and have them pick it up and swap them out. Within 3 weeks, all that was done. It was up and running, and he was fully operational. After everything was kind of, we figured out we could actually just make this asset swap, and the guy's life was changed. And from that point forward, he would just keep trickling information to me, right? He would keep giving me feedback about the pulse of the organization. And so, I think that getting to know the factory and the landscape, getting to know the wildlife that sits in that landscape is critical, because it's the wildlife that tells you what needs to be done.
Yeah, and that's a great example of the point you made around the baggage that came with past leaders that have come through, or past cultures that have been part of the organization. Is, even if you're starting up a new facility, you still deal with the baggage people bring as you hire them. So you do have to understand that in order to make the change, which really leads me to my next question. So that gives you a sense of the culture. What do you then do to start to change the culture so that you do things the right way, and you ask those tough questions and get people to embrace change?
So I've been a big fan of kind of choice architecture and nudges for a long time. And so I think that where I think most leaders are challenged, especially operations leaders, is that they come in, they see things that are wrong, and the perfectionism in that person, the drive for results, because every good operations leader has this unbelievable drive for results. It's up underneath them. At least the ones that I know that have been very successful, they want to deliver more than people ever expected they could deliver, and then they want to get up and they want to do it again tomorrow, right? So the issue is that not everybody in an organization behaves that way. Not everybody in an organization feels that way, right? If you look at athletes, or the people that are at gyms, or whether or not you study versus somebody else studying in academics, you've got this spectrum of people in the population that is your team, of different attitudes towards how they get things done. And so what I typically like to do is get a good understanding of what's valuable that's in the culture that we want to maintain, what needs to be addressed in the culture. If there's a level of risk aversion, people not wanting to own the issues that they're finding, that they're waiting to be told what to do, or if there's too much drive for results, and you're actually smothering and delivering results the wrong way, and you're leaving dead bodies in your wake as a result of your leadership practices, or the leadership practices that have been accepted in the team. To really get a good understanding of what's good and what needs to be adjusted. And then I use a very, very patient approach to adjusting that. And I typically will kind of fall back on how people learn. So most people learn through doing, and more importantly, they don't just learn through doing, they learn through the mistakes specifically, right? And so what that means from my perspective is that if I'm driving something into a direction that I need, a cultural direction that I want that business to go into, or that organization to go into, I want to give people assignments that are going to have them flex the muscle, or the behavioral competency that I want them to work on and improve. And I want them to struggle with it. But if they struggle with it and they don't realize that they've made a mistake, then they're not really going to learn, right? They're not necessarily going to learn that lesson. They're going to just be, well, that's a micromanager. That person over there, Sean is just being too critical with me. So not only do you have to set up a situation where people have an opportunity to try things, you have to set up it in a way where they have the opportunity to fail at trying things, but the failure can't be so big that it's catastrophic, that causes that person not to even start, right? Because the risk is too big. So it's got to be the right level of pressure, and the right level of stretch, and the right level of risk, so that you can start having conversations around, how did you do that better, right? And you can really move into more of a coaching role versus what I've seen many operations leaders do: be reasonable. I know what to do here. Just do it my way, and this is your list, right? So, I think that the way that I drive the culture is really through getting to know the individuals that I'm working with, to understand what their strengths and their opportunities for improvements are, and then give them assignments specifically that are going to both improve the areas where they need to work on to flex that muscle and to get into better shape, as well as to allow for a very explicit conversation about values, culture, and behavior.
That's a very high touch, personal involvement in culture, right? And I think we all look for, big levers we can pull. But as I like to say, organizations don't change, the people in them change, and then the organization has changed as a result. It's one person at a time, and that certainly is effective. It just requires a big commitment on the part of the leader to make happen.
Yeah, I think, Jamie, in my opinion, culture eats strategy for lunch, right? And if you can get the behavior right, you're going to get the results that you need beyond the results that you need every single time. And so it is a much more patient approach. And so you can't use that in every single situation, because the situation may be more critical and you may not have the ability to develop the culture as you're moving the business along. But if given the opportunity, I think that my personal approach is to be as hands-on and as involved as I possibly can, because what that ends up doing is that ends up creating other leaders that are like you, that are hands-on and involved. And as you're planting that seed, the root structure ends up getting very broad. It's like a grove of aspens. It becomes a connected organism, and that entire grove can feel exactly what's happening on the edge.
Yep, absolutely. And there's a multiplier on that time. It just takes patience, as you said, to get where you want to go with it.
Absolutely.
So speaking of that root system of building, having it grow and expand, you certainly know from your military service the importance of frontline leadership, the impact on culture as well as performance there. So what do you look for in effective frontline leaders? What do you look for either to hire or to promote or to build in getting good frontline leaders?
Yeah, so typically in most of my career, I haven't had the opportunity to really truly go and handpick my team, right? So in the military, you show up to the team that you're assigned to is the team that you got, and it's your job as a leader to make that team cohesive, right? To pull that team together. When given the opportunity to pick people, there's typically a technical competency threshold that I'm looking for. So given that the person's qualified from a technical and a functional competency perspective, typically I'm looking for people who are coachable and who have some level of intrinsic motivation. If you don't have intrinsic motivation, if you only have extrinsic motivation, I've got to pay you or I've got to threaten you to get you to do the things that need to be done, to identify and create the work list, to be a leader on the team that's going to actually be a force multiplier and not an anchor. That's probably the quickest way to not be on a team that I'm a part of, is to be extrinsically motivated and unwilling to be coached out of that, or to find and develop that level of intrinsic motivation to help you get some level of understanding of what the goals are, what we're trying to accomplish, and to even have a desire to be a part of the team. Below that, it's the very next question is the person coachable or not? And if the person is coachable, then the very next question is, do I have the time to coach them? Whether the person has the functional competencies or not, whether or not the person has the leadership skills or not. If I have the time to coach a person, just one of my personal passions in life is teaching leadership. It's teaching how to kind of deal with organizations and things like that. And so I will spend as much time as that person is willing to spend. I will put in the work, as much work as that person's willing to put in to help make them the leader that they want to be. And as impactful to the organization as they can be. And if they're not, again, that's probably the second quickest way. Not being coachable, that's the second quickest way to not be a part of the team, right? At some level, you just got to make a decision about whether or not you may like the person great, but they may be a better customer than they are a team member.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, it's a pretty good list. A lot to work with there. Intrinsic motivation's always been, one of my hiring requirements, because not many people want to do a bad job, but you have to want to do a better job, and that's sometimes a harder thing to find. So, and once coachable, it's an awful lot you can do from there. You can build an awful lot of things.
That's exactly right. I can teach you to make better decisions. I can teach you how to have good judgment. I can teach you how to deliver results and how to do the things that need to be done from an operations perspective. I can't teach you how to be motivated, right? You're going to have to make a decision. That's like I tell my boys every day before they go to school: have a good day or not. It's your choice, right? So that level of motivation, you either have it or you don't. And I know I typically stay away from black and white sayings like that, but you either show up to work with that level of motivation or you don't.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. So you talked earlier about patience, which is sometimes runs counter to operations. There's a daily or hourly granular need to perform and deliver. So how do you balance the long term and what you can build with the short term need for performance? How do you strike that balance?
Yeah, so I think that at least what I do is if there's something that's really important to me, I make sure that I follow it, right? And just by following it and looking at it on a regular basis, asking people questions about it on a regular basis, you're going to tell whether or not the person is intrinsically motivated and coachable, right? Because they're either going to pick up those social cues that, this is important, this should be your job, this should be a subject matter that you should know more about than I know about, because this is your direct portion of responsibility, and it's important enough to me that I'm spending my time on it. Mm-hmm. And so as I'm doing that, if I'm finding somebody that's missing on some of the basic execution portions that come as just kind of a basic ticket to entry for an operations job, somebody that's a shop floor leader, just by asking those questions, what you end up doing is finding and figuring out very quickly whether the person has the aptitude, they're motivated and coachable to be in the position that they're in. And so, kind of what I do over time with that is make a decision about, do I have enough time to coach this person, and is this person coachable, and does this person want to be coached? And once the answer to all those questions is yes, then at some level I can take as much time as we need. It's this, Jamie, it's really hard to build businesses. It's also really hard to kill businesses. The issue, especially when it comes to people development and organizational development, from my perspective, is the level of stress and anxiety that every shop floor leader, every executive is under in terms of delivering results for their shareholders and for their bosses. Shouldn't overwhelm you as a leader so much so that you forget how people learn and how to bring that team along, right? Mm-hmm. Every really good operations person can walk into an organization and make it run a little bit better, maybe even a lot better, very, very fast. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to leave that organization and not have it continue on. I want the legacy that I leave to be much, much, much more powerful than the results I delivered today. And so as long as I have the time, I'm going to give the person the time. If I don't have the time, I'm going to err on the side typically that this is a coaching moment and it'll be uncomfortable for the person, but I may end up taking over a little bit or end up helping that person deliver the results. And then I'll have a coaching conversation afterwards to talk about why I took over the command and control of that event or that issue or whatever that is. Yep. That had to be taken, right? And then again, through that conversation, you're going to learn very quickly, do I have a technical functional competency issue? Do I have a motivation issue? Do I have a coachability issue? And then you can start making decisions about how much patience you give people, how much grace you give people, and whether or not you need to promote that person to customer.
Great. All right, so we're kind of running out of time, but let me give you one last question to get into. You talked earlier about developing that intuition about the operation, what really matters, what's normal and abnormal. So how do you distinguish through that intuition or through any other means the difference between the needs to just fight the daily fires and what are really systematic issues that need a more strategic or a surgical solution? So how do you, I mean, there's so many problems. Ultimately, you can't solve everything at a root level. How do you balance that?
Yeah. So I think that developing the judgment or the intuition of selective neglect and the distributed leadership is one that just takes practice. So I kind of categorize that question under those two kind of major pillars of knowing what to neglect. Do you neglect the future? Do you neglect today? And whether or not you can build capability in your leadership team to have that shared judgment of when to work on today versus tomorrow, and when you just have to bite the bullet and work on tomorrow today, because if you don't work on tomorrow today is always going to be tomorrow. So I think the way that I typically do that, it kind of starts off with expectations from shareholders or from executive leadership in terms of what results absolutely need to be delivered, and that kind of those end up becoming your non-negotiables. You have to do that, right? And so beyond there, I try to minimize the number of non-negotiables that are kind of handed down. And one of the things that typically overwhelms people is that they feel like there's a lot of non-negotiables. Everything becomes non-negotiable, when in reality it's not everything, right? It typically will be delivery is the most important thing. I want you to fix all this other stuff around quality and cost, but if you don't deliver, you don't have a quality problem and you don't have a cost problem, right? Because you haven't got the product out the door in any way, shape, or form. So I think being able to structure the problem, understanding the actual needs of the stakeholders that you're delivering results to, gives you the ability to kind of understand where and when you need to get involved and how you can kind of set up the organization with tasks that are of acceptable level of risk for people to be delegated to, versus stuff that you need to just set the example and take on as a leader yourself and lead it through.
Yep, I think it's a great lesson for folks. I think people can over delegate and they can over control, but finding the right balance is super important. So, John, I appreciate you sharing your experience and insights with our audience. I think everybody will learn a lot, and certainly wish you the best.
Hey, thanks so much, Jamie. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing the video series.
Very good.